team and the distillery team, and
Right.
I'm not physically required to be in the space, and so I'm trying to, like, as tempting as it is to go in there, and I want to, and I
Sure.
want, I'm trying to set an example for everybody else where we say, like, no, we're taking this serious. Like, we can't do these things. If you don't need to be there, that applies to the owner of the company. I don't need to be there. So it's like, that's it for everybody. If it applies to me, it applies to everybody. So
I'm on a floor all by myself. Nobody here.
Yeah.
12,000 square feet and one human being.
Oh my God. Crazy times, right?
Yeah. Where you live here in town?
Well,
Where you live in town?
Yeah, Fritz Farm.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
And I live also in Virginia too. So I'm in Virginia.
Hey.
Hello.
Mayor, council member, how are you all? Kip?
Hey.
I'm good. And if you haven't noticed, I'm just here listening. So I don't know if I have too much to contribute, but I'm happy to if I can. But you all are so under control and know what you're doing. I'm good.
Angela, my apologies if we somehow didn't loop you into the first call.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I get Quinn's emails, but it doesn't have the Zoom information on it. So,
Got it.
but yeah, that missed the questionnaire thing. But I mean, I think that was more geared towards you all anyway. So, I had coffee with the mayor yesterday, so I gave my report that you all are all trying to be on the same page. So she's happy with that. So
Great.
Yeah. So I was really impressed. So
thank you. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. If I cough or sneeze, it's allergies, FYI. I'm not self-quarantining.
How you doing? DH. Ashton, Pete. Andrew.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, everybody. It's Quinn in the mayor's office. I think we're just waiting on Kevin, and then I'm getting Aaron Arnold Davis at Visit Lex, the Zoom info here. So just one moment.
I just sent it to Mary Quinn too.
Perfect.
Kevin.
Hey, everybody.
Amir, did we hear from Meredith? Do you know if we should wait on her?
I didn't see an RSVP. We can proceed. I know she has a really busy schedule and she was tentative on some of the meetings earlier, so I think we're okay to proceed.
Okay.
Well, if to go ahead and get it started, I'll go ahead and read the statement, and then Amir, I'll toss over to you.
Great.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150, as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05 and in accordance with CARA 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting.
Right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Today, what we'd like to do, I think, is we didn't really get a chance to discuss the third point, C, about any ideas for our process and scaling back operations. So I'd like to get some information on that. And then also, I sent in that email, there's an attachment of a rough draft of our responses and guidelines from the first meeting. So I don't know if everybody got that or has it handy, but it would be helpful for us to go over that and see if there's any additional input and tweaks we can make before we can get over a finalized copy or rough draft of one to the mayor's office. So to kick it off, why don't we just address C, which is what is our process for scaling back operations while safely maintaining operations in the event that we faced a second wave of COVID-19. I will kick that to you, DH, first in my screen there.
Mayor, just so I understand you, you're saying if a second round comes up, what are we prepared to do to scale back, assuming that we've gone back to full, or to scale back from the 33%?
So it says, what's our process? So it's a process for how we scale back while safely maintaining. So I'm going to assume that it's the initial phase. So let's say we do it to 33%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so
That's correct, Amir.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, we may not fully open on the date anyway. So for us, scaling back may look a little bit different in the sense that if a second round were to come, we would just remain status quo that we are now, which is all implementing the rules that we follow here on site from the governor's office, with social distancing, with employees self-checking of, answering the questionnaire checklist that he had, temperature, have you been around anybody, have you developed a cough, things of that nature. Should we be open? I think the appropriate response would probably be to go back to curbside service. What we would probably do in the midst of a second outbreak would just be returned to how we've operated the last 8 weeks, which is curbside, minimal contact with the face-to-face, with customers, and all our employees that are able to telework that have been doing would continue to do so.
Got it. So basically prior operating procedures.
Right.
Okay.
Because I've also got some questions about, going through some of the things that were released over the weekend about returning to work. It's again, not to beat a dead horse, but how do we minimize face-to-face time while we're still operating a restaurant? It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because unless we just remain curbside, so it's hard to envision closing our break room, which is about 12 by 12, when we keep our tap room open, which is about 5,000 square feet, right? So just trying to continue to work through those things as well.
Sure. And I think I don't know if you had a chance to look at the bullet points I put in for what we're going to send back. I think I touched on further clarification and sort of the distinction between breweries and distilleries, and really how breweries operate as tap rooms, which is kind of more like a restaurant or bar, and getting clarification there.
Right. See that. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Just real quick on that point of clarification as to whether breweries should be noted as restaurants. I think if that's something the committee is comfortable with, is recommending to the governor that breweries be included as restaurants, I think that's something that we could include in this report. Kevin, is that fair?
Oh, I agree. If it DH, I don't know if it's more, do you list them or do you ask for more guidance on what their thinking is? I'm good either way. It's just whatever you all want to do.
And I'll interject too, we put the question in there about the DH had brought up about, do you need a kitchen or is it just food, and further clarification, but I'll revert to the brewers on how.
The Guild of Brewers has sent out some communications that basically said they have heard from the state that breweries that have some sort of a food piece, including a food partner, are considered restaurants and would be allowed to open. Basically, the guidance that we received from the state on that level is that some leniency will be given. We don't have to apply to be able to open or anything of that nature, but we will be looked at very closely to make sure we're following the guidelines. And if we were not, then that would be very easily to have our privileges pulled back at that point. So, but we've been notified from the guild that the state has said the breweries with a food piece are allowed to open. Now, that being said, that would mean, obviously, by definition, that if you're just a brewery that's just a tap room that doesn't have a food piece, that you would be considered a bar and be pushed back to July 1st.
To kind of step in and answer a little bit of the question as far as do we feel like we should recommend it? I've seen at least a few things come through that showed that Ohio is allowing craft breweries to do on-premise consumption starting on the 21st indoors. So if we were trying to follow some of our neighbors' models, and I believe Ohio was one that we were talking about kind of mimicking and opening in tandem with, they seem to be allowing microbreweries with tap rooms and no food components to open up on the 21st.
Right. I'll make a note of that, Andrew, in there. I think there's no harm in just asking for the recommendation. We'll still can request the further guide. I mean, obviously they're going to need to clarify and give us a guideline. So we can have these detailed questions and ask for the guidance, but we can also just say we'd like a recommendation that we can, and we can cite Ohio as an example.
How about we recommend it and then seek guidance on how to implement it?
Sure.
Great call, Kevin.
Yep. Guidance. Andrew, do you want to pick up on the question C on your process for scaling back operations in the event of a second wave?
Yeah, I think for us, it's going to be pretty quick, easy, straightforward, kind of to DH's point. We have a lot of on-premise, and so we have a lot of our business we're kind of doing through drive-through, some delivery and stuff like that. So if this were to kind of have a second spike, we'd basically go back to where we are, or where they would allow us, where we don't have any on-site sales, consumption, go back to kind of a drive-through distancing. We have very minimal employees. I mean, it's really kind of myself, my co-owner, and maybe one or two other people. So as far as, the amount of staff that we have, it's very easy to keep some good social distancing with us. So I think for us, it'd be kind of what you said earlier, Amir, is just falling back to the procedures that we're taking now, because, our scaling back up doesn't quite look like other people that have more of a distribution arm and have maybe more employee reliant. We're more of on-site consumption reliance, and we can do that with a pretty small staff. So, we would just basically fall back to where we are now and just keep people outside of our four walls and deliver to cars and people's front door.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Pete, your thoughts?
Yeah, so when we initially open back up, it's just going to be our retail space. We don't expect that to be very busy at all without the tour aspect drawing people in. So, we're expecting maybe a bottle or a t-shirt here and there to go out the door, but, we're going to have everybody required to be wearing masks and everything. So if there is a second wave of any sort, we would just shut down that retail space again. We're following a lot of the guidelines from the Kentucky Distillers Association as well, since the majority of our on-site consumers are there for the Bourbon Trail tour. So we're following a lot of what they're doing, and it looks like tours are going to be quite a ways away. So so our facility is strictly going to be the retail store, no on-site consumption, no tastings, no samplings or anything like that. So it'll be very easy for us to step back and close again if that is necessary.
Great. And so I think that seems to be the theme, is reverting back, and there's a good point on the KDA guidelines. I don't know, DH and Andrew, if you guys feel, we made some notes in the benchmarks and guidelines for the Kentucky Brewers Association. Maybe putting a note in there too for that. I think that's going to be a great resource for I know for us on the KDA and for you guys to make sure our industries are operating in lockstep. So just understanding how everybody opens up and then how everybody scales back, and just making sure you're all on the same page. So I can put that in there if you guys agree. Okay. And I think, myself, for us, we're pretty much in line with where you're going to be, Pete. We're not going to fully open back up. We can't for tours, and if we do for retail, we just revert back. So I think everybody here seems to be saying we just revert back to the current status and follow guidelines for our organizations, our respectively. Okay, Meredith is not here, right? Okay, so we are good there. So I think we've got it for C. So now we can go over and discuss the answers that I put in there, summarized from our last meeting. We can just go off and I'll read these off. I assume, Quinn, Ash, everybody, we're looking to submit sort of a one-page bullet point format, nothing too overly detailed. Something like what I submitted to you is okay in terms of the final.
I think so, and then we'll just kind of format that accordingly to the others. I think the content, as long as the content's there, I think that we should be in good shape. But I'll let Quinn or Kevin chime in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Kevin, anything to add?
No, I agree.
Great. So I'm just going to go and read these off and open the board. Anybody has any comments, just shout it out. Any edits, thoughts, revisions. Primary questions: what are the plans for reopening, and what are the benchmarks, guidelines that are needed to reopen? Number one, adhere to the guidelines issued by the mayor, governor, and CDC. I'm just going to keep going. So anybody interrupt if you got something to add. Develop own internal plans in accordance with above. Consideration of individual circumstances, which can vary greatly across distilleries and breweries as related to size, scope of a manufacturing operation, exposure to public, and some overall business models more similar to bars/restaurants. Establish a protection of ongoing manufacturing operations. Establish a safe environment for employees and customers. Post clear signage advising customers of individual responsibility, and upon arrival communications with customers about expectations while at a premise. Public service announcements would be very helpful. Consumer confidence. And some businesses will not reopen in late May as allowed by choice due to the ongoing concerns and uncertainty, or will reopen in a restricted capacity, more restricted than is allowed. Anything else anybody would like to add, or any thoughts on the first question?
I think to kind of elaborate as far as our plans on looking to reopen, I was watching some of the meeting yesterday, and Tao was speaking up about some of what they were looking at as far as reopening, and she seemed to kind of touch on the same thing I did last week, which is looking at what kind of groups we might be able to allow. I think we originally were. I heard something about a 6-person kind of biological family. I pitched something where other countries have been doing groups of 10, 12, or something like that as far as social groups. Kind of to Tao's point yesterday, they've got 2 different floors like we do downtown. And so it could make a lot of sense to be able, especially as small as the square footage is and the way that it is laid out, it'd be very tough to get 15 people in there in groups of 2 with 6 feet in between them, and then to also manage that. So at least having some level of being able to, a group of 12 is much easier to manage than 6 groups of 2.
Andrew, let me just interject. And I think there's a little bit of an overlap of how we could answer A and B. And I did make a point in there in B in the next question. We can jump forward to that. Let me know your thoughts on the wording for this. Clarification on allowable group sizes in it. So this is, we'll jump to it. What are the business organizations in your sector? What do business organizations in your sector need to reopen safely under the governor's 10 rules to reopen? And it's clarification on allowable group sizes in an establishment and any room for interpretation based on group dynamics.
Yeah, I think that would kind of cover what we're talking about, because you were asking about how do we determine those groups? Are we talking about antibody testing and stuff like that? And as prime as it would be to be able to do it that way, I think people kind of are already growing their social circles and, congregating with more people the longer this kind of carries on. So finding a way to have some denotion that says like this group kind of has permission to be in public so that, you know, if you only have 500 square feet that you're trying to fit 15 people in, it'd be real easy to say, hey, this group, it doesn't matter if they're within 6 feet of each other, they already have been for weeks. And I think that becomes more manageable, because you look at least one story that I came across today, and I've only come across it on one site so far, but South Korea being kind of the benchmark of how they jumped in front of everything, you know, they started laxing all these rules, and supposedly they were able to trace a single person that went to 5 clubs in a single night, and then they've exploded into double-digit diagnoses again. So they turned right back around and shut down bars and restaurants indefinitely. And so trying to figure out how we can keep from having a bunch of different groups congregating in the same place, if it's just one social group, it makes it a lot easier to police those people and keep people separated if
Sure.
they're a little bit bigger herd.
We could add maybe an additional couple of things to that point in there, maybe pose the question of, you know, how do you define it? Is it antibody tests? Is it, you know, family units? Is it, you know, I mean, some people have big families. There might be somebody who has a family of 10 people all living in one house. So maybe we pose that question, and then maybe it's cohabitors. So maybe it's, I don't know, if there's, you know, 10 guys who live in a college house together, you know, maybe everyone shows the same license with the same address. Okay, you're good. What do you think about those 3 things to touch on? Antibody testing, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know where people are going to go with this. Family units, cohabitors. Any thoughts on those terms, or any other terms to put in to kind of beg the question about ideas?
As far as additional terms, I can't really think. It does get kind of interesting of how do you pose the question? How do you choose your group and maintain your group and not have somebody bounce from one group to another, and stuff like that. So that one's a little tough.
Well, we'll put it out there. I think that's what, you know, we can put it out to get guidance.
Right.
And I think a lot of that too could be on you know, upon arrival communications, you know, letting people know when they arrive.
Yeah.
Like,
Stick to your group.
Right.
stick to your group or you will be asked to leave. You know, I mean,
There's a really good term for like people that you're confident to be around. I don't know it. Kip, that's where you come in. There's a really nice package of word that you could say. It's a group of 6 people that have agreed to be around each other. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that term is, but there's a really good one out there that would be nice if we had it.
And more than one too.
Right. Yeah,
I think larger groups are easier to control than smaller groups, especially if you don't know who's in what group. And if I just have one person that's kind of the liaison for the group that you can kind of communicate with, then it just might make life a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, we'll pose a question. So I'll come into number. Any other thoughts on the first things, question A? Any of those points?
Amir, the only thing that I might suggest, and I think it's kind of implied, but I think it would define it a little bit more, is under A, your next to last bullet point is build consumer confidence.
Got it. Good point.
And Amir, I'd add that as you ask these questions, anything that we don't sense much pushback, are you all wanting to include that as a recommendation unless stated otherwise? I'm just trying to help Quinn as he begins thinking about how he's going to draft some of this stuff.
I would say yes. I mean, I think that these are things that we're seeking clarity on. We would recommend that they do them unless I'm wrong. I mean, I think there's going to be things that come out of our questions, specifics, answers. And I guess whether or not we recommend that they implement the answers to these questions, I would venture to say yes. They're going to do it anyways. So just do it. Give us, really what we all need is just clarity, I think.
Okay.
So to Andrew's point, would we like to include in the report a recommendation that allows for rental of private spaces to groups of less than 10?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like it. I mean, as far as what the number ends up being, getting a foot in the door with less than 10 would be fine. It's trying to figure out, you know, if we are trying to balance both the economics of all of this, as well as the safety and the public health, then, you know, anything is better than nothing. And then, you know, we don't want to go too far too fast and have a second outbreak. But, you know, I definitely wouldn't mind seeing something that would be more sustainable. You know, running out to 8 people gets a little bit tough with everything, all the other finances connected with it. So, I mean, any place to start is great, but I think, yes, especially because we could do things reservation based. You know, we don't have as much randomness of, you know, somebody decided on a whim to come in. It's more of like, hey, you blocked out this time, so we kind of have everything out in front of us, and you can plan around things better. Because I think having maybe some level of reservation based sort of thing would make things cleaner as well. If the public already knows that, hey, you should call ahead and have one of these maybe little nooks or something that we created out of 4x4s and plexiglass, you know, maybe trying to create some, you know, isolation nooks and stuff like that. And you could say, hey, you can book this for an hour at a time, half-hour slots. And then you just won't have to worry about maybe an influx of people all showing up at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. And how do you deal with that, especially if somebody gets unruly?
And then not that this is going to help anything or just pose more questions, but Bishop, we've talked about going to reservations only at both locations, right? Like blocking off time periods of, you know, maybe not going straight open table because we're not built like Malone's or Jeff Ruby's. You know, we're very, very, very different. But maybe just saying like we're going to accept reservations from 1 to 2 and 2:15 to 4 so we can clean or whatever it is. But the issue that we're running into, you know, again, back to our content on Georgetown, is like, what does the public safety piece look like of it? Where if I have a group of 10 people that have rented this place for 2 hours and they get an hour and 30 minutes in, it's almost like a 2 hours. How much can you drink at that point in time? The safety of people coming and going is what we're trying to figure out how we manage that too. So just something to put out there for consideration is we may go to reservations, but then how do we police people's consumption during that time too, whether we limit it or things of that nature. So just don't want to turn it into like a break room kind of or breakout games kind of thing where you're in there for a certain amount of time and, you know, you've got this amount of time to get X amount of beers drank. And by doing that, we're encouraging overconsumption. So just something else to consider.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, you are definitely going to have your people where you don't know how much they consumed before they came, and some people that might bring something with them. And, you know, I think you do still kind of leave it to your star training, and, you know, you make it very well known that if you abuse these rules, you're not going to be getting a new reservation. But I mean, there's always going to be the people pushing the limit and ruining it for other people. So there's really, I don't think, any great answer on that. But I think, you know, you just got to step on it early. And if you threaten that, you know, they can't ever really come back, especially during quarantine, but even maybe beyond, you know, people have to be adults about this as well.
Yeah, like I said, I got all the questions. I got none of the answers. So
oh, no, absolutely.
Very few.
And it's alcohol. So, I mean, even if you do have them, like, things change fast. So
again, I would think that on arrival notification, having it maybe a printed thing that you literally put in the hand of every customer who walks into your premise that has a list of the new rules of operating and have warnings in there about. Yeah, it's just like there's no misunderstanding. It's like we gave this to you and it just look right here. Point number 10. You do this, you're out of here, you know.
And your signature is at the bottom of the page. So
yeah, I mean, you could even ask people to initial it and give it back. I mean, you know, these are unprecedented times. And if people want, you know, I think this is sort of, I don't know if the word privilege is the right word to use, but everybody's putting themselves out there, putting, you know, their employees into a tricky situation, their businesses and their operating licenses into a tricky situation, and trying to do it, yeah, so they can run their business, but also give their customers a good time and a safe place to do it. So I think that asking people to really respect and abide by a set of rules is very reasonable. And if you drop the hammer, it's like, doesn't matter if it's 5 beers later, it's like, dude, check it. All right. Any other thoughts on question A, all the points I rattled off before we go to number B? All right. B, what do businesses / organizations in your sector need to reopen safely under the governor's 10 rules to reopen? guidance from state, distiller, and brewer trade bodies on best practices and a set of standards. Further clarification from the governor on the 10 rules and how applied specifically to breweries and distilleries. And I made a note that I think that could be coordinated with the trade bodies above. This is why we pay them dues, and they think, from a bigger umbrella point of view, and they think about everybody. So I think that might be a wise thing. Guidance for breweries specifically on how to operate tap rooms. Is a tap room without food considered a bar? Is a kitchen required to classify a brewery as a restaurant? Would amended operating hours be helpful? Clarification on allowable group sizes in an establishment and any room for interpretation based on group dynamics. And I'll add those points to consider possibly antibody testing, family units, cohabitors. And lastly, clarification on closing common areas, which is vague and problematic based on the layouts and operations we all have. Any thoughts on any of those? Or anything else you'd like to add under this question? Going once, twice? All right, sold. That's B. Then lastly, C, which is the one we did not get to really cover, but we did at the beginning of this call. I think we all seem to agree. It was pretty short and succinct that really the way we would scale back is revert back to the prior phase, and to maybe do so with any kind of guidance and input from our trade bodies. All right. I believe that covers all the items on the agenda. Quinn, Kip, anybody see anything else we're supposed to cover or anything we'd like to? Mary, Ashton?
I don't have anything to add. Kevin, do you?
All right. Well, should we adjourn the call, or Andrew, you going to share that beer with everybody?
If you come through the drive-thru, I will.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way to do it.
Hey, we're still on ice water here in Georgetown.
I got to have stuff to do.
You're doing quality control. It's work, man.
It is.
I think once we just go ahead and cover C, which everybody did verbally, is get that down on paper. Not that we have to close up, but I just wanted to thank you for chairing and everybody else for sitting in on this, because I know everybody, you got a lot of time, but you don't have a lot of time. So it's been very helpful, and it's going to go a long way in us, trying to help you get back open and get back to the things we all enjoy.
Absolutely.
Which is your all's products.
Amir, thank you. Kip, thank you, everybody. Appreciate everything you guys are doing for us. And if you ever need anything or further information or opinion on whatever, let us know. We're here. So thank you guys for everything you're doing for us.
Thank you, everybody. I will send out that summary, revised guidelines, and let anybody chime in for any final input one last time after update C.
Sounds great.
you. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a good one.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.